strengthening or weakening the human experience. And by current, I mean the speed and the breadth with which we are innovating and applying technology, which I'm sure, as all you know, is very unique in the history of our species. So I will start out with a presentation, roughly 10-15 minutes, and then I hope I have presented more than enough food for thought for an engaging conversation with you guys. I will start out very briefly just showing what I'm talking about, and then I'll be a bit more specific in the rest of the presentation. So the basic idea is that our species, of course, in principle, is 3.8 billion years into development, right? With the first self-replicating cells to what we experience today. That is part of our history as well. And at a time where our ancestors, they had no tools at all, you can kind of say that we were completely dominated by the realities of nature, those within us and those around us. And then gradually through technology, bit by bit, we're moving away from that dominance, and we are creating kind of wiggle room. We're creating abilities that nature did not bestow on us. And with those abilities grows kind of like a degree of choice for our species that other animals do not have. So the question is, and that's what I'm kind of postulating, is are we just moving from one sort of dominance to the next? This is kind of like showing this idea with a kind of pseudo-scientific bell curve, so to speak. But again, what I'm trying to show is that there is this potential development from nature's dominance to technologies, that with technology, with growing technological capabilities, we are increasing diversity, perspective, and choice. And that at some point, kind of like rates of diminishing return, a fairly well-known and accepted principle, that with technology as well, that these very basic and very advantageous aspects of technological development are kind of decreasing at a certain point. Oh, and by the way, if at some point during my presentation there's something that you really need to ask, do not hesitate to interrupt me. The cursor is visible? Okay, thank you. All right. So again, I think it's really important when we talk about technology's development that we look at it almost like a biologist would look at evolution, biological evolution. So we come obviously from ancestors, even in evolutionary time spans, fairly recent ancestors that did not use tools. And then we all know we started using tools. These are already some that have a certain degree of skill in making them. And then we go on to the kind of areas of scientific and technological expertise in our times that are so manifold and compared to what we have had in our human history are so complex and capable, it's really mind-boggling, even though we are so used to it already. But in this greater context, it's unbelievable. And of course, there are amazing advantages that come with all these areas of research and technology application. But we all know that there are also questions, kind of more mundane questions, perhaps, as costs, but also heavier ones like the role of ethics. What is the role of ethics in regards to this onslaught of technological innovation, questions of how it interacts with our environment, affects other species, common resources, and questions of perhaps unduly power of corporations and governments. So what I hope is what we can agree on is that technological progress is not an end in itself. It's something that should be in service of the human experience. So how do we determine whether what we're doing now as a species is benefiting the human experience? And what I will do in the next, or how I structured the next few slides, is that I will first try to define, how can we define what the human experience is? Then I will look at some basic dynamics of technology's development, some of them that in principle have been in place ever since technology or tools started evolving with the beginning of our genus 2.5 million years ago. And then I'll look at how these dynamics are influencing the human experience. And lastly, I'll make some suggestions what I think could contribute to an improved culture of technology. So, what are we humans? Are we humans beings that are exclusively concerned with technology? That's all we are about. We invent technology, we apply technology, we think, we breathe technology. Is that all that we are? And obviously this is provocative. I think all of you will agree that no, the human experience is far more than that. Even in our time where we are experiencing a huge array of different cultures and blending of cultures, and or equally important, access to all these different kinds and blending of cultures, and especially so, of course, over the history of our existence. There's a huge, colorful array of aspects. I tried to put the very basic aspects, this is just my suggestions, of what defines the human existence that I think kind of transcends culture, particular culture, and time. So human beings 500, 2,000, 10,000 or more years ago were spiritual beings in a sense that we try to make sense of ourselves and how we fit in with our surroundings and greater existence. 5,000, 10,000 years ago, people, of course, were social beings, biological beings, and so on. So this is, of course, a simplification in the sense that it's two-dimensional. These aspects influence each other, so it's something more fluid, three-dimensional. But just as an idea that I think there is a basic a definition, or it's possible to describe what the human experience is in a basic way. And now I'm going to look at the basic dynamics, and then after that, how these dynamics are influencing that broad and colorful human experience. One basic dynamic, I think, is a kind of obvious one over the course of our history, that we are increasing our technology exposure. There's just more and more technology around us. That's, I think, a fairly obvious observation. Another one I hope that is also fairly obvious is, or it needs a little bit of explanation, that more and more of our primal human resources are being devoted to technologization. And by primal human resources, I mean such basic assets of ours like attention span, our time, our energy, our curiosity. These are all very basic human resources, and more of them are going into technology, innovation, and application. Another basic dynamic is that we're becoming increasingly technology dependent. It kind of comes a little bit out of the fact that we're doing more and more with technology through technology. So our dependency on technology is growing. And that our technologies are becoming more capable, more complex. Something that I'm not going to be talking about, but of course is rather relevant, are unintended consequences and the rising complexity, or our ability to deal with the rising complexity. It's a big issue, but I'm just going to leave it at this for now and just leave it as a basic dynamic that technology is becoming more capable and more complex. Another one is that our technologies are becoming more independent of direct human kind of giving orders or saying a tool or technology to do this and that. Our technologies are becoming more capable in the sense of capable of extracting information from their environment and kind of make decisions based on that information. And a last important dynamic, very important dynamic, but actually more recent compared to some of the other ones I just presented, is that technology and biology are starting to merge. Remember that beginning slide, caricature kind of this person being surrounded and going crazy by all technologies? Well, the point I'm trying to make is, it used to be that it actually is, around us, technology, that it's something that surrounds us, is outside of the physical reality of our body. But as we all know, this is changing over the last, say, 2 generations or so, and it's again, the context here is evolutionary rhythms and time spans, and considering what has been done over the last 50 or so years is mind-boggling. So, how are these dynamics influencing the human experience? Obviously, through perception and experiencing through technology. First and foremost, and that's kind of like my main take when I try to analyze what this development is doing to our experiences, not looking technology in the sense of, and that's important too, but not at this level of what the advantages and disadvantages are. But first and foremost, technology is not good or bad. It's just a reality, and in our case, it's a mediator. Through technology, we do things or experience things that we could otherwise not do or experience. And what is shown here, I found this off the web, it was said that this is more or less the same location at the inaugural presentation ceremony of Pope Benedict, and then 8 years later, Pope Francis. So, of course, this is more like an anecdote, you could say, but still, I think it speaks a clear message that even though what is going on is real, that people are experiencing what is going on, and we've all seen that through a technology, not through their own senses. So the effect here is that technology is displacing non-technological realities. That's one influence of these dynamics on our human realities. Another one is kind of, because we are occupying ourselves more and more with technology, that our thinking and our acting is more and more influenced and penetrated by ideas and concepts of technological efficiency and functionality. Remember at the beginning, the colorful two-dimensional table? Well, we are more, our species is more about than technological efficiency and functionality. But the consequence, or the basic effect here, is that we are increasingly aligning ourselves with the logic, inherent logic of technological evolution. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in 2 slides. Another basic dynamic, or I should say an influence, these dynamics influence on our experience, is because we are occupying ourselves more and more with technology, devoting our time, our energy, our creativity to technology, that as a logical consequence, there's less and less of these resources for anything else. Because even with all the best technology we have, a day still has 24 hours. That's something that we can't change. So more of our time and attention goes to technology, therefore less of it is available for anything else. And by that, I don't mean particular persons, I mean us as a society. And the basic effect here, and it's in red because this one and the next one are kind of like what I perceive to be the key effects of these dynamics on our experience, is that the diversity of the human experience is being reduced. This is, of course, happening very gradually, but it's something that I think we need to pay attention to. And as a last aspect coming out of these dynamics is that there is the self-logic in technological development. But what I mean by that is, if we know A and B, there's a certain logic that we will come to C. That's kind of what the previous slide was about, or connected to technological efficiency and functionality. That's what kind of like these M&Ms, or you could also use Hansel and Gretel. And the effect here is a reduction of choice, and why that is the more we submit to the inherent logic of technological evolution, the less choice we have. Because if we know A, B, and C, then, well, why should we not go for D? Because there's a logic there. And if we don't have other assessing criteria, then we'll go for D, because why not? There's no reason not to. So how do we improve our technology culture? I apologize for using this word sustainability, which has been so overused over the last decades, but so far sustainability, again, roughly for maybe a generation or two, has become more apparent that that we are woven into nature's fabric. Of course, we are one biological being amongst all others living in this time. We depend on nature. And so our actions need to consider that, need to be sustainable from an environmental point of view. But also in regards to social aspects, we are considering concepts of sustainability that it's not to our benefit just to, for instance, maximize efficiency or maximize profit if other important aspects are kind of just being pushed aside. So what I'm suggesting is that these concepts of sustainability in the sense that we are using something to our benefit, but we're not going to use it up because there are other generations, particularly other human generations coming after us, that should be using the same things or should be able to use the same things and enjoy the same things that we do. So should basic aspects of our human experience also be considered or looked at under the aspect of sustainability and protect them for future generations? And of course, not just for humans, but in this case, yes. So what could possible features be of a more sustainable technology? One very, very important aspect, it's almost like the basis for any major significant change is slowing down. We are not capable of currently culturally integrating what the worldwide innovation machinery is putting out. So the less cultural integration there is, the more we'll be aligning ourselves with the inherent rhythms and rules of technological evolution. Second one, and I didn't really get to talk about it, but I'm putting it here nevertheless because it's very important. I think Darwin once said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the absence of reasoning is the very definition of instinct. So I think there are certain instinctive inclinations of ours, like curiosity, that are very important in technology's development. Also, for instance, the herd instinct, where we copy each other's behaviors, emulate each other's technology use. And so these motivators are not in principle a problem, but if they're kind of empowered, greatly empowered, as they have been over the last decades, and don't have anything counterbalancing them, it becomes a problem. So we need to introduce more deliberate patient motivators. And a last key feature, I think, or key idea of a more sustainable technology culture is balance between technology and biology. Biology here is in parenthesis, meaning that it represents just everything that is not technology, which I think in this way also makes sense because, for instance, our social being, that we are social beings and enjoy being social, of course, is connected, strongly connected to the fact that we're social biological beings. So, and balance means that at the very least 50% of our societal resources, at the very least, go into these other aspects of who we are, and that if that is the case, then we can help ensure a broad and free human experience. Is this all utopia? Possibly, I don't know. But I would like to suggest these three examples to consider. In the early 18th century, we had in Western Europe a system of feudal and church reign that was, from the church side, about 1,000 years old, and from a more feudal side, you could say 5 or more thousand years old. And people started thinking of alternatives, and who would have thought that 60, 70 years later, there would be a fairly quick process where this age-old system that was considered sacred and hewn in stone would actually come to an end. Another example is the abolition of slavery. In the late 18th century, I kind of doubt that a lot of people would have bet on that method of raising production or efficiency, however you want to call it, would actually, in England, I think it was the early 19th century. And so, yeah, 30, 40 years later, it started becoming a reality. And a last example is women's rights. In the mid-19th century, I'm sure a lot of people did not perceive it to be a reality soon to come, that women would have the same rights as men and be voting and voting themselves into office. So all of these very important and basic changes in our realities, they started out with thoughts, with people thinking about the status quo and perhaps how to improve it. And this leads me to my last slide, a quote attributed to Buddha, that we are shaped by our thoughts, that we become what we think. We are beings with choice. That, I think, is one of my main messages in what I'm trying to communicate. And because we're beings with choice, and because we have it means that we have an influence on the way that we're filling human realities with technology. We have an influence on the manner and speed with which we evolve, technologically speaking. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Very good, very good. So first when Christophe introduced me to James and I started reading the book, I was very intrigued by it and some parts of it, especially because, like he was saying, the world is going in such a direction where we're trying to increase diversity more and more, in a way, explore cultures. And obviously Logitech, we're always looking for new technologies and which niche should we go to. So when we talked a little bit about before discussing this series and how would we approach it, and I mentioned this over lunch with some of my colleagues here, he says this as well. He gave a good example. It doesn't matter. It depends on how much you have of something. No matter if it's the best thing in the world, depending on the quantity, can become something that it's not good. And I think that it sums up all of this, that it's here. So yeah, very inspiring. Thank you. After my 2 cents, like how Jean-Michel would say, anybody here has questions before we go over? All right. There you go.
Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I really love the idea of slowing down to give more time to digest technology, and the whole society can look at it and say, okay, what are we going to do? Now, looking at what's happening today, it's exactly the opposite. I see acceleration and exponential growth of all these domains. Mm-hmm. Do you have examples or ideas of or places where the slowing down is happening, or people trying to do that in reality?
Yeah, I think there are many examples. I don't know if you saw the invite to the presentation. I lived in San Francisco for 11 years, and I think, in America, the way, at least the difference I experienced between Switzerland and America is just everything. It's true, many things are more extreme. So kind of like, the forces kind of like tearing at culture, society are also a bit more extreme. So I see people there, in a sense, ahead of our experience here in Europe, that there is a stronger and broader sense of going back to nature, of slowing down, of people being more conscious how much of their time is online, consciously going offline. So yes, I definitely do see examples. I just recently, I forgot the title of that book, but I just saw a book that was exactly about these offliners, or maybe that's even the title of the book. So there is that. But I think what you said and what I said needs to be put into perspective. What you said is kind of like, I would say perhaps that's the big river, that's the big river going. And what I just described are certain swirls and splashes, this and that direction. But I completely agree. Currently, that river is going in that direction that you're describing. I don't know if I'm interpreting your question right, but maybe you're asking how probable is it that there will be a change? Because is that what you're kind of driving at, or?
There are small places that are growing. If more and more people are slowing down,
right,
then you can see a tipping point so that it becomes mainstream.
Right. I agree. I personally think that at this point, whatever can be a real catalyst for change is kind of missing at this point. But nevertheless, I wouldn't have put in all the years I did in writing it. There is always a beginning to a change, right? So that in itself doesn't mean anything. But I agree, it's very early stage. But I'm convinced, based on discussions I had, the kind of like a gut discomfort that not all is good the way we're handling things. It's really getting more and broader acceptance. Yes?
Yeah, I really like what you said, because we are not free to do anything we want. Everything we do is depending on what we are interacting with, and the technology is not a part of that rule. And we need to be careful how we interact, because it bothers others actually. And I really love the chart, the table where you can see the new technologies and then the bad side of the new technology, because everything is interacting with each other. And the problem is you have no way to control that, because it's about culture, it's about education, it's about rules. And we have the same problem in every aspect of our life, in fact. I don't think there is any solution for that, because it's a really big problem. It's really complex to solve. But it's for all the problems you have mentioned compared to the technology, is how we handle that, and what is the limit we can fix, and who fixes the limit, and who controls that the limit is not bypassed. So that's a question. I'm not quite sure I understood the very end, but I'll start out with your observation of essentially our ability or inability to deal with complexity. Is that what you were driving at, right?
Who regulates that?
Yes. Well, right. So I think what is important to see is that, yes, as I think I mentioned there are unintended consequences, and unintended consequences are an inevitable part of the complexity you described, because we can't know everything, right? So there will always be consequences that we haven't foreseen or evolve in a certain way that are not beneficial. The big problem, I mean, if you look back, fairly early on in industrialization, the invention of harnessing the power of steam, right? That was a huge innovation. But looking back today, technologically speaking, it's a fairly simple innovation that had huge consequences, and again, so many effects that were not foreseen. Just thinking about, the worker class and their plight, that was a direct consequence of it. So now we're in a situation roughly 150 years later, where it's not just a steam machine defining our age. It was invented 10, 20 years ago, and it's defining our age, and will do so. And now we're inventing these kind of steam engines like on a monthly basis. Perhaps I'm exaggerating a bit, but the point is we are inventing many steam engines at the same time. So we are creating so many unintended consequences, and we are creating so many tasks that we should be paying attention to and managing, that it's impossible. It's impossible, and by this deluge of innovation, we're just making it more likely that we don't have choice. All we have to do is kind of run after and try to adapt more or less to the realities that we're creating. But saying, okay, we're going to apply this only in this area, or we're not going to apply it at all, that choice will be forfeit.
Hello. I have a question regarding, you spoke earlier about sustainability and also the bringing up the theme of having a choice. So I wanted to see, what is your perspective on data privacy in that relation? Because, I mean, the more technology we have, also the more control we have, or the more control the companies of the technology we use have over us. And if you look today at, I mean, the main players like the Googles and Androids, they have this mass of data and it's increasing. And I don't really see where consumers have a choice here to keep that freedom, And I wanted to have your perspective specifically on that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I I very much agree that that's a huge problem. I think if you remember on that slide where I kind of listed all these different science and technology areas, and the bottom right question mark or red point was growing government and power of governments and corporations. Yeah, it's obviously a huge problem. Thanks to WikiLeaks, we know more of how big a problem it is. There is choice. There still is. There is. How does it say? Free software. I mean, software that is not developed proprietary. I'm sorry. Open source. Thank you. Open source software, which I think I'm not very savvy. I'm more of an end user, but I was told it's actually not that difficult. But so taking myself as an example, this is something I could do. I'm not doing right now because perhaps I'm not considering it that huge a problem on my radar screen of things I do consider a problem. But that technology is evolving so quickly as it is now has a lot to do with private or particular interest pushing that envelope, because there are professions, jobs to be had, there's profit to be made. So, but it's not hewn in stone that technological innovation has to come from groups of human beings that are trying to maximize profit. It can be, and it is in our current system, but it doesn't have to be. And maybe now inside of your head there's some alarm bells going off. What is he suggesting as a regulation? And I'm going to be frank with you. It compared to what we define as entrepreneurial and scientific freedom, it would certainly be a reduction of those freedoms. And I think it's not pleasant, and I do think it's a disadvantage, actually a considerable disadvantage, if we reduce entrepreneurial and scientific freedom. But that has to be put into perspective of how you value a broad and free human experience. So in the end, it's a value judgment. There's nothing objective about this. It's a value judgment. How beautiful, how valuable, how amazing do you see a broad and free human experience? And if you think it is something amazing and worthwhile protecting for many, many generations to come. I mean, our species is just 250,000 years. I mean, yes, our species, 250,000. It's evolutionary speaking, it's nothing. We're babies. Sharks have been more or less unchanged for 40 million years. So if we want this experience to last a bit longer, or quite a bit longer, then we need to start considering very basic changes. I don't know, did that somehow answer?
Thanks a lot for the food for thought. I wanted to go back to your starting point where you mentioned that we came from a dominance by nature and we went beyond the peak, and potentially now we're in a situation of technological dominance. To me, it doesn't feel this way. To me, it feels like technology opens up a lot of possibilities, a lot of options, but it also comes with the implication that we have to make choices, each and everybody. And for example, what you mentioned about these offliners and all these trends that emerge in the US or also around the world, for me are a typical example of this, people taking choices not to go online, not to opt into new technologies. So I wanted to ask you, can you give some examples where you see this technological dominance, where people don't get to choose anymore, where they're forced to live a certain lifestyle? Because, for me, it doesn't feel this way. So I want to see, where did you actually get this idea from?
It's a good question. First of all, very obviously, if you think of that slide with all the science and technology areas in blue, right? All these areas, and I think I said that during the presentation, gave us immense advantages in regards to food, sustenance, longevity, security, entertainment. All these things are great advantages and amazing pluses. But you always also have to kind of look at the disadvantages. But I mean, people living in San Francisco say they live in a bubble, you know, in a sense that it's a kind of a shielded environment, and the way they're experiencing technology is very positive and it's wonderful. And I grew up in this country, and I feel Switzerland is even more of a bubble, you know. And to give you one example of what I think before your question was driving at about corporate power, because we have we don't have genetic modified foods here in Switzerland, it's not such a big issue. But I can tell you, from the 11 years I lived in the United States, and particularly in California, there's a huge fight going on between Monsanto and a growing part of the public that does not want to be forced to eat foods that they question on a very, very basic level. So that's a huge issue. And then another example would be genetic engineering, you know, in regards to humans. I don't know if you read in the newspaper that in China there has been a team of scientists that they manipulated an embryo. An embryo that would have not lived anyway, but the fact is that there are huge ethical questions that we even have currently a problem defining, let alone finding answers for. And if we just continue now without taking these questions seriously, then essentially what we're doing is just saying ethics have no role anymore in our development. Because if you want to give them a role, you need to consider them. You need to try to formulate the questions and adapt technological application to whatever your finding is. Another example is artificial intelligence. Stephen Hawking, about a year and a half ago, he's usually, as far as I experienced, him very pro-technology, perhaps also for self-interest, his wheelchair and all, but he issued a very staunch warning against the rash and hasty development of artificial intelligence, kind of the way we've developed technology so far. So another example, I don't know, I could go on and on with electricity, for instance. In nuclear technology, you do not have much of a choice there. So there are many, many realities that right now, it doesn't really infringe on your comfort zone that much, but you don't have a choice. I don't know, you look skeptical.
To be honest, yes, I am skeptical. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that, for example, in electricity, you don't get much of a choice, but right. I mean, electricity it's not a recent innovation, right. But there's tons and tons and tons of things out there which you can try, but nobody forces you to try.
Absolutely. I mean, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. And you also said the bell curve that we already passed. I didn't say we passed the peak.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that based on these dynamics, I think there is this basic inherent problem to the way we are.
You're speaking more about a risk than effect that already has realized.
Exactly. Exactly. Sorry. And just to give you one more comment about Monsanto, so that it hits home. Monsanto is trying to actually dismantle democratic processes. Vermont, the voters in Vermont clearly said they wanted labeling of genetically modified foods. And Monsanto is now trying on a federal level to kind of do away with that and prohibit, to make it illegal for states in the US to put in this kind of labeling. That is heavy. You know, when corporations really try on that level, and I think it's a very personal choice what you put in your body. And if a corporation comes and says, no, you do not have the right to know where you're putting it, those are things you want to pay attention to. Yes?
Just as a follow-up thought on what I said earlier, I think already for data privacy, data protection, your choice is extremely limited, because if you, for instance, today want to have a cell phone and you don't have Google account, you cannot use it. And for the choice of your data privacy settings, you don't have a choice within Google. So either you accept that Google is using your data, your personal data, your geolocation, everything in the way they construe it in their setup, or you say, no, I don't use a cell phone. So not a cell phone, but a smartphone. So this is where choice gets limited by large corporations. It's the same like with Monsanto, where you have genetically modified food, which is eventually not even indicated on the packaging. So just as a follow-up thought, as a data privacy.
He's a lawyer. So we have one more question here, and then I'll go to you guys over there online if you want to ask something right after Denis.
So thank you for the pitch and the depth of the topic. I just watched the movie Tomorrow, like many people maybe have. How many of you have watched the movie Demain? Nobody? So it's a movie that was just broadcasted, I think, launched a few weeks ago. It's French, but this is available in English. And this movie has a lot of success. It comes from a group called Colibri. And the beauty of the movie is that I think it asks all the question and challenge you cover, but it shows how people brought solutions. They made choice, often locally, but they take each topic like education, energy, food, and many other, and they basically show example in the US, in the Nordic countries of what people have decided to do. And just incredible. And I think it shows that the movie is positive, it's not negative, which I think is one of the reasons for its success. So I would really encourage everybody to go and watch it because it shows that you can find solution. And maybe one last thing. What struck me is the power of local. Because in this company, we had a tagline for a long time, I think we still have it, which is think global, act local. I'm wondering if this tagline is valid anymore, because the power of being local, thinking and acting local is huge. It's just a reflection on the movie.
Yeah, all right. So anybody who's online would like to ask something, make any comments, you can unmute yourself. Yeah. We can. Also, one of the things that, adding up to what you were saying and what he's saying, is the scalability of this. We saw each other the other day as well about micro farming and how it is to go back to the basics and take off the machines and agrotox as well. And this is here in Switzerland and in France, and how they're starting to plow the earth again like it was before. And we're discussing two things about that. And one is about the scalability of that, and the other one is who's willing to go back to plowing lands and giving up other kind of more intellectual jobs or different kind of things that you do. So, and there's also another book that we were discussing the other day, that the moment, this is, Marie-Ange commented with me that some sort of meteorite hit Earth again and then exploded everything, and human race had to start over. So kept from basics, and all of a sudden a guy invented the wheel. So it's like you were saying, it comes to curiosity. Is how can you stop? And we watched the TED about growth. Stop it? Should we stop it? How should we address it? So I think it's a theme that goes always. The only question that I pose in terms of this micro farming or other choices that we do is how scalable it is to be effective on feeding the whole planet, for instance, on how much we're growing so far, or and how efficient it can be as well in that sense. And how do you see that in scalability?
It's a very good question, and I agree. That's very positive that many people are rethinking, certain mechanisms and trying to maybe they're not trying to set an example, but just trying to live their lives differently. Based on my observations and what I've been reading about who these people are, it's either people that are, mostly I think it's people that are comparatively speaking well off, So who has the ability to go out and, if not buy a piece of land, but kind of like, how you say, not rent. Yeah, but you know what I mean. Those are usually not people that are just about, making it. And the fact that we are 7.3 billion people on this planet, and the UN World projections, they have been going up every few years. Right now, I think it's at 10.3 billion by the end of this century. So, honestly, no, I don't think it's very scalable, but I think it's still extremely valuable what these people are doing as to cultivate kind of the idea of alternatives. That is extremely important because, again, you know, take Enlightenment and the French Revolution, right? If there hadn't been Enlightenment philosophers envisioning an alternative social order or contract, to use it, you would probably still have had the revolt in Paris, as there have been many peasant revolts, but without a view and a vision of an alternative, they would have just had the revolt. Maybe they would have had a deal, okay, the next 2-3 years, no taxes, blah, blah, blah. It would go back or never had left the realm of feudal and church reign. So that's why I think what you mentioned is extremely important, but no. For 7.3 going on 10 billion people, no, it's not scalable.
It's not possible to continue. Like your example of Monsanto is a good example of what cannot continue. Yeah. So there got to be something else. We are going against the wall. Right. It's a given. It's like the environment and the global warming. So there got to be other options.
I mean, there are many other options. The question is, you know, how should I put it? If you have a poorly constructed hammer that for some reason, like 90% of the people are hitting their thumb while hammering in it, it's a negative effect of a tool of a technology that is obvious to everybody. But that's the problem with rising complexity. How do you make people aware that the food that they're ingesting, and I think by the way, I think it's a big mistake of the movement against Monsanto and genetic, that mostly their concern is potential health effects and environmental effects, which there are. I mean, health effects, it's still kind of contentious, but environmental effects, more and more we understand that they're real, that you can prove them. I think the much bigger effect, and I alluded to that previously before, is what kind of power are certain groups of people having over our lives? That they can say, even though you democratically decided you would like to know what you're eating, we're going to say you can't, you don't? That's a huge issue, and it's not, and this is just the beginning, you know, so it can't continue. I agree, from an ethical point of view, it can't, but the question is, at what point do you have a situation like that winter in 1789 in Paris when people say, F it, you know, I'm going out there. But that's something that would probably have to come, I think, unfortunately.
I think it's coming.
Anything else, guys? Anyone else wants to say anything? Any more questions? I guess you guys online are fine as well. Nobody wants to say something? All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up here.